Daniel Okafor was 43 years old when he walked into the ballroom of the Meridian Hotel on a Saturday night in November and saw his ex-wife for the first time in 8 years, standing near the bar in a red dress with a champagne glass in her hand and a smile that had not changed 1 degree since the night she had told him in the kitchen of their apartment on Birchwood Lane that he was the kind of man who peaked in high school and had nowhere left to go. Veronica had no idea that the man who had walked in wearing a navy suit that cost nothing remarkable and driven there in a car that attracted no attention was the controlling shareholder of a logistics and infrastructure firm. With operations across 14 countries and a valuation that had crossed $1 billion the previous March during a round of funding that 3 separate financial publications had covered in detail. She had no idea that his name appeared on a Forbes list she had not thought to check. She had no idea that the quiet, unassuming man she had spent the cocktail hour casually dismantling in conversation for the benefit of people they had both known since they were 17 was, in every material sense, the most consequential person in the room. She had never made a more expensive miscalculation in her life. Before we get into this story, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from, and hit subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you absolutely do not want to miss. The alarm went off at 5:08 in the morning and Daniel was already sitting at his desk. He had been up since 4, not because anything was wrong, but because 4 in the morning was when the Lagos office came online and he liked to read through the overnight summary before the day started accumulating its own weight. He had a cup of tea on the desk, black, no sugar, brewed in a plain ceramic mug he had owned for 11 years, and a legal pad covered in the small, dense handwriting he had used since graduate school. The desk was not impressive. He had built it himself from a solid core door and 2 filing cabinets in the second year after the divorce, when he had been living in a 2-bedroom apartment in East Atlanta and putting every available dollar back into the company. The desk had followed him through 3 offices and 2 buildings. He had not replaced it. He ran Okafor Logistics from an office in Midtown Atlanta, though running it from any single location was not quite accurate given that the company's operations touched warehousing networks in West Africa, freight coordination across Southeast Asia, and a domestic infrastructure consulting arm that had recently won a contract with the Department of Transportation that his communications team had been more excited about than he was. He had started the company in the 2nd year of his marriage when he was 27 in a rented office the size of a walk-in closet with 1 client, 1 employee besides himself, and a business plan he had written in longhand over 3 weekends and refined over the following 6 months until every number in it was defensible. The company had grown the way he had grown everything, incrementally, specifically, without announcement, through the accumulation of solved problems and kept promises. Veronica had not believed in it. This was not a rewriting of history. She had said it directly more than once in different registers of the same conviction. In year 2 of the marriage, she had said it gently, framing it as concern. Maybe he should look at something more stable, something with a salary, something that didn't require them to keep the thermostats so low in January. In year 4, she had said it with impatience. Other people their age were buying houses, taking vacations, building the kind of life that was visible and measurable. In year 6, she had said it with finality, standing in the kitchen on Birchwood Lane with her arms crossed and her voice flat. Daniel was the kind of man who had potential that never materialized, who worked hard without going anywhere, who confused movement with progress. She had used the phrase peaked in high school, and he had stood there and absorbed it and not said the things he could have said because he had never been interested in arguments he could win through words rather than results. She had filed for divorce at the end of that year. He had not contested it. He had not hired the most expensive attorney he could find or attempted to extract anything beyond what was fair. He had divided the assets cleanly, paid what the agreement required, and moved into the 2-bedroom apartment in East Atlanta and built the desk from a door and 2 filing cabinets, and gone back to work. The reunion, was the idea of a woman named Cassandra Wells, who had been the class president of Jefferson High School's graduating class and who had, by all accounts, maintained her organizational enthusiasm across the intervening 25 years. The invitations had gone out 6 months in advance. Daniel had received his by email and had put it in a folder he checked intermittently and had forgotten about for approximately 4 months before his assistant, a precise and slightly terrifying woman named Gloria, had placed a printed copy on his desk with a yellow sticky note that said, "You said you might want to go to this. It's in 3 weeks." He had looked at it for a moment and said yes. He had not gone because of Veronica. He had not known she would be there. He had gone because Jefferson High School was where he had first understood what he was capable of. In a mathematics class taught by a man named Mr. Ibarra, who had looked at a 15-year-old Daniel's work one afternoon and said, quietly and without theater, "You think in systems. That is a rare thing. Don't waste it." He had gone because that building and those people and that specific chapter of his life had preceded everything that came after. And 25 years seemed like a reasonable interval at which to acknowledge that. He had driven himself. Gloria had suggested a car service, as she often suggested things that would make him look more like what he was, and he had thanked her and taken his own car, a 3-year-old Volvo, that was comfortable and reliable, and communicated nothing in particular to anyone who saw it. He had worn a navy suit that fit well and was not flashy. He had arrived at the Meridian Hotel at 7:15, 15 minutes after the cocktail hour began, and walked into the ballroom alone. He saw Veronica within 3 minutes. She was near the bar, precisely as she had always positioned herself at events, close to the center of the social current, visible, animated, working the room with the confident ease of someone who had always known how to make a space feel like it was organized around her. She had not changed dramatically. She was 42 now and carried herself with the kind of assurance that required maintenance, and she had clearly maintained it. She was with a man Daniel did not recognize, tall and well-dressed, who stood slightly behind her in the way people stand when they are with someone who prefers the front. Daniel got a glass of water from the bar and found Marcus Webb, who had been his closest friend at Jefferson and was now an orthopedic surgeon in Birmingham, and who had sent Daniel a message 2 weeks earlier saying he was coming to the reunion and they needed to actually talk this time, rather than exchanging occasional texts across 6-month silences. They found each other near the windows, and the conversation picked up the way it always picked up between them, without preamble, without the social warm-up that other friendships required. Marcus said, "You look the same. You have less hair," Daniel said. "That's medicine," Marcus said. "It takes the hair first." They talked for 40 minutes. Marcus asked about the company, and Daniel gave him a real answer rather than the abbreviated version he gave to most people. Because Marcus had the kind of mind that wanted specifics and the kind of friendship that could handle them. Marcus talked about his practice, and about his daughter's first year at Duke, and about his father's recent health issues that were manageable but were reminding him of things he would rather not be reminded of yet. They were, in the way of old, close friends, almost immediately past the surface. It was during this conversation, while Daniel was listening to Marcus, that he became aware of Veronica moving toward them. He registered her approach the way he registered most things, calmly, with full attention, without giving anything away on his face. He had not seen her in 8 years. The last time had been a brief, functionally necessary conversation at a mediator's office, handled through their respective representatives, in which they had signed the last of the divorce paperwork. She had not looked at him that day. He had looked at the documents. She arrived with her champagne glass, and the man Daniel did not know, and a smile that was doing the specific work of performing ease. "Daniel Okafor," she said, and her voice had the warmth of someone who has decided in advance how a conversation will go. "I heard you might be here." "Veronica," he said, "good to see you." "You remember Thomas," she said, gesturing to the man beside her. Daniel did not remember Thomas because he had never met Thomas, but he shook the man's hand and said of course, and did not correct the frame. Thomas sold real estate, it emerged over the next several minutes. Commercial properties, he said, mostly in the Buckhead corridor. Good market, strong relationships, doing very well. He said doing very well the way people say it when they need the room to register it. Daniel listened and asked a polite question and listened to the answer. Veronica had been watching Daniel the way she had always watched him in social situations, with the particular attention of someone taking inventory. She said, "So what are you up to these days, Daniel? Still doing the logistics thing?" "Still doing it," he said. "Is it going okay?" The question arrived in the same register she had always used, the register of someone who had already concluded the answer was no and was asking as a courtesy. "It's going well," Daniel said. She tilted her head with a specific gesture he recognized from 9 years of marriage, the one that meant she was being patient with him. "I always thought that was such a hard industry. So much competition, these big companies just swallowing up the smaller ones." "It can be competitive," he said. "Thomas was saying the other day, weren't you, Thomas, that the real money now is in real estate? That logistics is kind of a, what did you say, a low-margin game?" Thomas had not been expecting to be brought into this particular conversation, and his expression showed a brief flicker of it before he recovered. "Well, there are margin pressures, certainly, depending on the scale of the operation." Daniel nodded with genuine interest. "Scale makes a significant difference," he agreed. Veronica's champagne glass moved in a small gesture that dismissed the topic. "Well, as long as you're keeping busy," she said it the way you say something to end a conversation that has confirmed what you already believed. She looked around the room, including Daniel, in a smile that was technically warm and substantively conclusory. "It's good to see you looking well. Really. You always did handle things quietly." She said this as if quiet were a consolation. Marcus, beside Daniel, said nothing. He had the particular stillness of a man who is processing something he will discuss at length later. Veronica drifted back toward the center of the room with Thomas and her champagne glass, and Daniel watched her go without any particular feeling that needed managing. He returned to his water glass. Marcus turned to him. "She didn't know," Marcus said. "It was not a question." "No," Daniel said. "You didn't tell her. She didn't ask." Marcus looked at him for a moment. "Daniel, she just described your company as a low-margin game and suggested you keep busy like you're running a food truck." "I know," Daniel said. "And you said nothing." "I agreed that scale makes a difference," Daniel said, "which is true." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, quietly and without theater, and shook his head. "You are the strangest man I have ever met in my life." "You went to medical school," Daniel said. "You've met stranger." They found a table and sat down and kept talking, and the reunion moved around them in the way events move when you have found the one person in the room you actually came to see. Daniel ate dinner and spoke to several people he had been genuinely glad to see. Mr. Ibarra was not there, having retired years ago and moved back to Nigeria, but his name came up twice in conversations that evening, and both times Daniel felt the specific warmth of a debt he had been paying forward for 20 years. He spoke to Cassandra Wells and thanked her for organizing the evening, and meant it. He spoke to 3 other classmates whose trajectories he had watched from a distance and whose work he respected. He did not seek out Veronica again, and she did not seek out him. It was the following Monday that everything changed, or rather, it was the following Monday that Veronica learned what had been true for some time. Her friend Patricia, who had also attended the reunion, and who apparently had a closer relationship with financial news than Veronica did, sent her a text message at 9:22 in the morning. The text contained a link to a Forbes article from 7 months earlier. The article's headline included Daniel's name and a figure. Patricia's message above the link said only, "Did you know about this?" Veronica read the article 3 times. She was in her car in the parking garage of the building where she worked, and she did not start the engine for 11 minutes. The article was thorough. It covered the founding of Okafor Logistics, its growth trajectory, the West African expansion that had been the company's inflection point, the domestic infrastructure consulting arm, and its recent government contract, the Series C funding round, that had valued the company above $1 billion. It quoted Daniel briefly, two sentences about operational philosophy, both of which were so characteristically understated that she recognized him in them immediately. There was a photograph of him on a logistics facility floor in Lagos, wearing work clothes, reviewing something on a clipboard with a site manager. He looked exactly like himself. She thought about Saturday night. She thought about the champagne glass in her hand and Thomas's comment about low-margin games, and her own voice saying as long as you're keeping busy with the particular register of someone managing condescension into something that could pass for warmth. She sat in the parking garage and let the weight of this settle into her, and it settled the way things settle when they are true and heavy, and there is no version of the next hour in which they become lighter. She called Patricia back. Patricia said, "I cannot believe you didn't know." Veronica said she hadn't been following business news. Patricia said, "He was on a list, Veronica." A list. Veronica said she knew. She ended the call. She sat for another few minutes. Then she started the car and went to work, because there was nothing else to do, and the work was still there whether or not the floor had shifted under everything else. Daniel, meanwhile, was in a 7:30 meeting with his CFO and two members of the operations team reviewing the infrastructure contract deliverables for Q1. He had a cup of tea on the conference table, the same plain ceramic mug, and his legal pad, and he was asking specific questions about specific numbers in the way he had always asked questions, with precision and patience, and without raising his voice even when the answer required someone to acknowledge that they had been imprecise. The meeting ran 90 minutes. He had 2 calls after that, and a site visit in the afternoon to a distribution facility in Forest Park where a loading dock configuration needed his judgment. His phone had 17 unread messages by noon, none of which were from Veronica, and all of which were from people whose names he knew and whose messages were worth reading. He read them in order. He responded to the ones that required responses. He put his phone back in his pocket and ate lunch at his desk while reviewing a proposal. His mother called at 2:30. She called every Monday at 2:30, which was a schedule that had evolved organically and that neither of them had ever formalized, and that Daniel considered one of the more reliable and important structures in his life. His mother was 71 and lived in the same house in Decatur, where he had grown up, and she had the particular quality of attention that made every conversation feel like she was giving it all of herself, which she was. She said, "How was the reunion?" "Good," he said. "I saw Marcus." "How is Marcus?" "Good. Less hair." She laughed. "Did you see anyone else interesting?" He thought about this for a moment. "I saw Veronica." His mother was quiet for a brief interval. Then she said, and nothing. "We spoke for a few minutes. She was with someone." "Did she know?" His mother asked this the way she asked things, directly without pretense, because she had never seen the point of pretense. "No," Daniel said. "Did you tell her?" She didn't ask. His mother was quiet for another moment. "Daniel, you walked into that room and you didn't say anything." She was describing my company as a low-margin game while her boyfriend agreed. I found it more interesting to listen than to correct. He heard his mother exhale, not a sigh exactly, something between amusement and exasperation, a sound he had been producing in her since he was 12. She said, "You are exactly like your father." "I know," he said. "You've been telling me that for 40 years. He also let people underestimate him until they couldn't anymore. It seemed to work out for him." "It worked out for him," she agreed. And then, "Are you okay?" seeing her. Daniel thought about this honestly, the way he thought about everything. He thought about Saturday night and the champagne glass, and the specific tone of "as long as you're keeping busy." He thought about the kitchen on Birchwood Lane, and the word "peaked," and the 9 years of a marriage that had been real in the ways marriages are real, and had ended in the ways marriages end when one person has decided it is over long before they say so. He thought about the two-bedroom apartment, and the desk made from a door, and the long years of building in quiet while the company became what it had become. "Yeah," he said. "I'm fine." "Good," his mother said, and then, after a moment, "She built a picture of you and she lived inside it. People who do that, they get comfortable in the picture. They stop looking at the actual thing." "I know," Daniel said. "The actual thing is considerably larger than her picture." "It is." "Good," she said again. "Now tell me about the contract. Gloria sent me an article. I've been waiting to hear it from you." He told her about the contract. She asked specific questions, the way she always had, about the details and the implications, and what came next. He answered all of them. They talked for 40 minutes. When they hung up, he sat at his desk for a moment with the phone in his hand and looked at the drafting lamp on the corner of the door and cabinet desk and thought about the things you build in the years when no one is paying attention, and what they look like when the light finally finds them. 3 weeks after the reunion, Daniel received an email from Veronica. He read it at 6 in the morning with his tea. It was 4 paragraphs long. The first paragraph was apology, sincere and specific. She named what she had said and acknowledged what it had communicated, and did not minimize either. The second paragraph was an attempt at explanation, which he read carefully and found honest if incomplete. The third paragraph said that she had spent time in the years since the divorce thinking about what had gone wrong between them, and that the reunion had clarified something for her about a pattern she had carried into that marriage and had not yet fully examined. The fourth paragraph said she hoped he was well and that she was genuinely glad for what he had built, and that she did not expect a response and would understand if she did not receive one. He read it a second time. Then he set his phone down and picked up his legal pad and continued reviewing the Q2 projection summary that had been on his desk since the previous evening. He did not respond that day. He thought about the email. Over the following week, in the background way, he thought about complex problems, not with concentrated focus, but with the steady low-level attention that usually produced clarity over time. He thought about what the email deserved, he thought about what was true, he thought about the kitchen on Birchwood Lane, and the apartment and the desk and the 11 years of work that had preceded the valuation and the Forbes article and the Saturday night at the Meridian Hotel and all of it, the whole accumulation of it, and what he honestly felt standing at the end of that long road looking back. He felt, when he examined it honestly, something close to neutral. Not bitterness. He had spent very little time in bitterness, which had always struck him as an inefficient use of interior space. Not triumph, because the billion-dollar valuation had never been a message he was sending in her direction. It had been a problem he was solving, a company he was building, a set of commitments he was honoring to the people who worked for him and the clients who relied on him, and the version of himself he had decided to be in the years when no one was watching. Veronica was not, in the true accounting, a significant part of that story. She had been a chapter. The chapter had closed. The book had continued. He wrote her back on a Thursday morning, 9 days after her email arrived. He was brief. He thanked her for writing and told her he had read it carefully. He said that he accepted her apology and meant that in the full and uncomplicated sense. He said that he hoped she was well and that Thomas was good to her. He wished her clearly and without condition. He said nothing about the company or the valuation or the reunion or the champagne glass. There was nothing there that needed saying. He sent the email. He closed the laptop. He picked up the ceramic mug and the legal pad and walked to the window and stood for a moment looking at Atlanta in the early morning. The skyline coming into its shape against a sky that was still more dark than light. The city in the specific quiet of an hour when most of it was still deciding to wake up. He had built something real. He had built it from a walk-in office and a legal pad, and the kind of thinking that Mr. Ibarra had recognized in a 15-year-old and named out loud so the boy could hear it and carry it forward into the years when naming it himself would have felt like arrogance. He had built it through a marriage that had not held, and an apartment that had been too small, and a desk made from a door. Through years of incremental problems solved and promises kept, and the slow, unglamorous accumulation of a company that had eventually become the kind of thing that appeared in articles and on lists, he had not built it to prove anything to Veronica, but he understood, standing at the window with his tea, that the years she had decided he was going nowhere had been the exact years he had been going somewhere specific and significant, and that the only reason she had not known was that she had made a picture and lived inside it comfortably, and stopped checking whether the picture and the actual thing were the same. They had not been the same for a long time. He turned from the window. He had a meeting in 45 minutes, and a flight to Lagos on Wednesday, and a site visit in Forest Park tomorrow, and a call with his CFO at noon about the Q2 projections. Gloria had left a note on his desk about 3 things that needed his signature before end of day. His mother was expecting him for dinner on Sunday. Marcus was in town next month, and they had agreed on Tuesday evening. He had work to do. He had always had work to do. That had not changed and would not change, and he was in the full and honest reckoning grateful for it. The work was not a consolation for anything. The work was the thing itself. It had always been the thing itself. He sat back at the desk he had built from a door and 2 filing cabinets and opened the Q2 projections and picked up his pen and started making notes in the small, dense handwriting he had used since graduate school. The tea had gone slightly cold. He drank it anyway. Outside the window, Atlanta was waking up. He did not look up from the page. He had seen the view, and it was good, and now there was work, and the work was also good, and he had long ago learned that a man who knows what he is doing and why he is doing it does not require the room to register it. He did not look back. There was a company to run, and it was already Thursday, and the Lagos office had sent 3 messages since 5 that needed his attention, and the legal pad had 4 items on tomorrow's list, and none of them were going to address themselves. He turned to the first item. He began.